In this episode, we're going to talk to Drew Hinton from Aero Safety. We recorded this down in Orlando at the VPPPA Safety Conference. So yeah, you're going to hear a little background noise. It's a little busy on the audio side, but that's okay. Conference recordings are always fun. We did a full video of this interview that you can see over at the Safety Pro Podcast community site. You can hit the link in the show notes to go over to that website. As always, show some love to Aero Safety. Go to aerosafetyus.com. Check out all the safety services that they have to offer for your organization. And if you tell them you heard about them from the Safety Pro Podcast, you'll get a nice little discount on your first quote. That's aerosafetyus.com. Before we get into today's topic, I have one question for you. Are you still painting your floors for 5S markings, things like that? Don't do that. Head over to mightylinetape.com/podcast, a great partner in safety. They've been with us from the beginning. They have some really good products that are going to get you out of a whole lot of time, material, and maintenance and upkeep. Their floor marking tape is second to none. It takes up easily, doesn't leave a sticky residue. They've got floor tape with beveled edges for forklift traffic, carts, things like that. So it really holds up well to that kind of traffic in your facility. They also can do custom floor signs. If you have a particular logo or a message, they can make that happen. Get a free sample and try it for yourself. Again, head over to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Tell them that we sent you. You will get a free sample to try out in your facility today. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast.
All right, welcome to the Safety Pro Podcast. I'm here with Drew Hinton. We're down at the VPPPA. I always have
to get them all.
Yeah. VIPA. The VPPPA Safety Plus. I've had my coffee. I don't know about you, but so we're at the Safety Symposium. We're in the fishbowl. I call it the fishbowl. It's this little podcast booth. And we have like all this glass over here, so we're like distracted by people walking by.
People are walking by, tapping on the glass like we're a bunch of fish or something.
It's going to be Lori Frederick, who is going to be throwing stuff over the top at us like we're at the zoo, the human zoo. All right, so we're down here at the Safety Plus conference, and we're going to talk today about the somewhat recent, when was it? The NFPA?
Early this year.
Yeah. The NFPA 70E updates.
Yep.
So for those who are interested in the arc flash, I'll let Drew talk about the whole standard and the scope, its application, and then we'll get into the updates. So Go ahead, just introduce us to 70E.
Yeah, so 70E, they just came out recently-ish, I guess you call the 2024 standard.
Okay.
And they have previously last several editions been updating every 3 years, so it's pretty routinely updated. But this is dealing with any kind of electrical safety in the workplace. It's the gold standard. A lot of people refer to it, like you said, the arc flash standard. So, but it goes into a lot more than just arc flash. It goes into the shock hazards. It looks at, of course, the arc flash hazard, but it goes to the shock hazards, doing the electrically safe work condition, energized work permits, all that stuff. So
I think some of you mentioned, people refer to it as the arc flash. Mm-hmm. One thing I run into a lot is people will say OSHA arc flash. Mm-hmm. And OSHA doesn't have an arc flash standard per se.
Correct.
So how does OSHA drag this in? We all know this in the safety world, so go ahead and...
Yeah, so they've got subpart S for dealing with 1910 general industry standards. They're going to have their electrical safety standards, and they have a lot of similar requirements that are in the OSHA
for electrical safe work practices.
Yep. So, and they're all spread out. Subpart S has a million different substandards of that portion of it. But where they drag NFPA 70E in as a consensus standard is they recognize it as this is the
gold. They reference it.
Yeah, this is the gold standard of electrical safety in the workplace.
So we call that incorporating by reference. So they will incorporate the standard as their own by referencing it. Yeah. So it's not, you're not going to go into the OSHA 1910, the 29 CFR 1910 and read NFPA 70E. They will simply reference it. And sometimes they won't reference a standard directly.
Yeah,
like they will just say nationally recognized standard. So
and this is one of those examples, right? So they're not going to come out and say NFPA 70E, it's always an old version. It's incorporated a reference into this standard here. But there's going to be a lot of supplementary material that they put out and interpretations, and there's several standard interpretations people are asking about. Is 70E legally enforceable? And, like I said, in a nutshell, they're going to say, it's kind of the gold standard. We're going to look because it's an industry best practice that you should be going along with those standards.
It's like them referencing an ANSI approved piece of PPE, like hard hat. Or respirator, NIOSH approved. They're not going to get into the weeds of the latest NIOSH or ANSI because they'll keep updating them, and OSHA doesn't want to get into that, which is why ANSI was created, was the research arm and NIOSH for that OSHA would use. So OSHA doesn't want to update every 3 years, so they just say, as long as it's whatever the recognized thing is,
or compliant with the 1969 version of this ANSI standard.
I know. See, OSHA, where did they shoot themselves in the foot with that? Because now they're stuck with, because it's codified. So then they have to rely on letters of interpretation, but letters of interpretation aren't enforceable. They're not. They're not code. They're not regulations.
And usually they'll say as long as it doesn't contradict that older version that
the PPE standard, they locked themselves in years ago by referencing a particular one when they should have just left that off and said current ANSI. Okay. So that gets us to NFPA 70E by way of OSHA referencing applicable industry consensus or industry standards. And now, so Drew, your background is in fire rescue, right? Originally, before you got into workplace safety. Let's back up a second. Explain to everybody who maybe don't already know you. I don't know who you are, where you've been, but Drew with Aero Safety is going to tell you all about himself here. So go ahead and give us your rundown.
So I did 12 years total as a firefighter, EMT, 10 as a career in Louisville, Kentucky. We did all those roles, ranging from just the basic firefighter stuff, but also got into the building inspections, fire inspections. So we were the ones going out and doing all the, the annual fire department inspections with that. Been doing safety for 15 years, and a lot of that stuff overlaps. Like we were talking about off camera, I'm the same way. I learned NFPA before I learned OSHA. Right. So
and when I started in the fire department, in order for me to learn about OSHA, I had to get out of the fire department. And it was like, oh my God, there's a whole nother world out here, which is good.
Absolutely. And NFPA stuff's going to be a lot of those best practices that are more recently updated based on research. But but like I said, a lot of that NFPA stuff does fold over into the OSHA regulation. So we a lot of our, like myself and the guys that that work with me, like I say, I've kind of got both sides of the fence. Seeing safety side of things when safety does work, and hopefully people go home safe and healthy, and then also the fire department side where people's
responding to
some kind of emergency because safety doesn't work basically.
And I think going back to what we were talking about just a second ago about like a lot of folks think they tie NFPA 70E to OSHA. So true is that with a lot of building code stuff, where it's not. It's life safety code. Used to be the BOCA. Remember those days? Building Ordinance and Codes Administration. Now it's the life safety code. What's the life safety code? What organization? NFPA. So, a lot of us in the fire side, especially if you went into prevention and education, inspections, things like that, building inspectors know this too as well for local jurisdictions. The life safety code, because that's what determines the exit width, size of the door, the signs, the lighting, illuminating, the emergency lighting, backup light, like all that stuff. OSHA has some language in there, like testing and things like that, but they'll reference NFPA. And that's where we get the, I get people that push the button on the light, and I'm like, nope. How long do you hold that? And then annually, you got to do it for 90 minutes. Anything on a battery backup, you got to just kill the power. And people are like, how are we going to kill the power? That's, by the way.
You can't shut machines down.
Yes. By the way, that is an easy write-up. That's like something you can have printed up if you're an inspector, because most companies aren't doing it. Not out of malice, but it's because of the way the buildings were designed and wired. I remember working for a manufacturer, I won't name them, just out of respect because they didn't do anything wrong, but we had maintenance go through and run those little janitor keys at the school?
Yeah.
You got to put the key in to turn the lights on or off, and otherwise, we had it wired with a switch to those lights with the emergency backup. So once a year, they would just go and mark the time that they turned it off and go around and do those so that they would light up, and then 90 minutes later they would come back and look to see if they're still on. And and you didn't have to shut down, you didn't have to go to the breaker panel. Now that also got you out of opening a panel that might contain other switchgear or components that gets us back to what we're talking about, which is 70E, NFPA 70E. So what changes have there been in the last 3 years? What did they update? We'll focus on that.
Yeah, so there's been a few substantial updates, and there's been a lot of some minor terminology. For example, previously everywhere there was a mention of the word shock. Now they went back and added electric shock just to specify. They've taken off
what other shock could there be? Let's first explain why they had to say electrical shock, because there is another shock I'm thinking of, and it may not be an electrical shock from the components, right?
Are you thinking static, or what do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking like when you touch you go to touch the door on a panel, and you have insulated, right? You have insulated boots and shoes. Well, you're going to hold. You can build up and hold a charge, and so then when you touch something metal, like at the gas station,
absolutely,
that's always fun. You get a discharge. Some people think like there's a fault in this panel. Well, there could be. I don't know, but.
Right.
So they had to change. They added electrical shock.
So now everywhere it was previously mentioned as shock, now it says electric shock.
Interesting.
They've also went back and removed the term leather on the protector. So when you're wearing your rubber insulating gloves, you're supposed to wear leather. Previously, it would say leather protectors over the top of it. Now they're just saying protectors over
because there's other materials now
other than leather that you can utilize that are still being.
Goes back to that. Be careful with your language, because you could lock yourself into a compliance trap.
Yeah.
To where if you're using something that's tested, rated, and approved through testing, not approved by NFPA, but you use that material, you're in violation if it's not leather, technically.
Yeah.
So now you have to have an administrative allowance created by these governments. So that creates a lot of bureaucracy, right? So
absolutely.
So they just remove leather.
Yep. So it's allowed for other protectors out there.
So they're cleaning up a little bit.
Yeah.
All right.
And they've got some of the more bigger, larger changes, or a bit more significant changes, are the protective distances. So there's tables in the NFPA 70E that tell you here's your limited approach boundaries, here's your restricted approach boundaries, dealing with shock hazards, and they made it more defined on the voltage ranges. So
it used to be very generic.
It may say like 150. Previously, it may say like, just making numbers here, it may say 150 to 750 volts.
Right.
Now they're
pretty big range.
Now they're like 150 to 250, and 251 to 3.
So if you don't have an electrical or an engineering survey, an arc flash survey that determines specifically the energy potential, which is key, the potential that could be present at a piece of equipment or switchgear or a panel, where then they will calculate your distance and you put that label on. You can use this chart, and it's gotten a little more narrow with the category, with the
because there were a lot of
levels.
broad ranges out there for those, for the ranges of the nominal voltage. And they've narrowed that down. So they've added 5 or 10 different or more stringent
levels.
Levels on there.
And that all, what does that do though? Like, it's approach distance when it's closed, when the panel's closed, which could be 0 with some voltages or voltage potential. But then it's when it's open as well, working clearance.
Exposed energized
conductors.
Yep. And so that in turn, by changing or adding more definitive criteria for those nominal voltage, has also changed some of the approach distances. Some of those may have only changed by a few inches, but they still have changed. It may have went from 1 foot 0 inches to 1 foot 2 inches now.
And what is that? Is that in working clothes, work clothing, or is that with so that's the trick. That's the trap people fall into. They're like, well, what if I put on an FR shirt? What if I have an FR rated shirt? And it's like, well, What's the energy potential?
Right. Well, this is telling you when you have to
dawn all that stuff,
right? Because you start getting above, these certain distances. They're going to give you a distance that is the equivalent of telling you at this level, at this distance, is your limited approach boundary is a distance when you have a potential for a second-degree burn at 1 second of exposure.
And that's another thing people don't understand is they're not saying you're not going to get injured.
Right.
We're talking about something that is likely to be survivable. You could still die, perish at or below even some of those levels with certain PPE.
Yeah.
And we were talking about permissible exposure limits in another discussion, and people don't understand PELs. That's an average. Like, you can still be within the PEL of an exposure, and because of other health conditions, physiological, like in the way you react to things, you could be like, in trouble.
Yeah,
at or below the PEL.
Right, and
so the same thing here.
Yeah, and there's lots of, I always explain to it, how you're looking at how big of a bomb basically do you have? Is it a firecracker? Do you have a car bomb? How big of an explosion? Because people think of, like I said, they think of that standard, think of arc flash and basically an electrical explosion. So that's what I'm trying to figure out is how big of a bomb do I have? How much protection? But there's still, like you said, there's still plenty of, electrical equipment or components out there at several plants and companies that will have labels on there that says we're not servicing this because it's got too much energy. We don't have the gear for it, whatever reason.
We'll farm it out.
We're going to outsource this out
to somebody who's trained and equipped, knows how to deal with this.
And even sometimes even though you have the highest level of Category 4, highest level of arc-rated PV.
Giant bomb suit.
Yeah, the bomb suits with the blowers inside everything because it gets so freaking hot.
Yeah.
Even though you may have those things, some of these arc flashes can get up to 36,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to withstand that temperature.
Right.
So, like I said, it's just to save your life. You're still, in a lot of cases, you're going to get jacked up at some capacity.
You could be permanently disabled, but you'll be alive.
Right.
And that needs to be added into a lot of trainings, especially. We get a false sense of security with equipment. Fall protection is a great example. We thought, I got a harness on. Dude, you are going to be messed up. You fall over that edge with a 6 foot, you pull that deceleration device out, and you smack the side of the building, especially if you go head first or fall on a weird thing and the lanyard's under your arm and you yo-yo, you spin, you're going to get messed up.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Period.
Absolutely.
We definitely need to add, we don't need to be graphic, but we need to add that component to our training of saying, look, this equipment is really designed at best to likely keep you from perishing, not getting injured.
Right.
So I watched a video once where a guy was like, he said he had copper embedded in his teeth and took off part of his face. He survived. The equipment worked, but it's like a hand grenade going off with the shrapnel and the metal components, and it just went right into him, and he survived. The equipment worked. It was rated. They determined he was wearing the appropriate gear.
Sure.
But holy smokes. Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah. So, they've went back and revised some of those things. They've also, I think one of the bigger revisions they made was the definition of normal operating condition.
Oh, really?
So they've added a 7th component to that. You now have to verify. So it's like just that one condition is a checklist in itself. And so where normal operating condition comes into is whether or not you are exempt from, or one of the many things you can be ties into is whether or not you're exempt from doing an energized electrical work permit.
A live electrical work permit.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. Live electrical work. People used to say, well, if it's inconvenient, I'll do it. No, that's very clear in the language.
Right.
We can't shut down production. Well,
sorry.
Kill somebody. We're going to shut the whole place down.
Exactly.
It's the example I like to use is you've got a hospital and there is a circuit that is powering life support for critically ill patients. You can't shut that off.
Right.
So the 7th category defines working condition, or is a component of the working condition.
Normal operating condition.
Operating condition.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, how is it supposed to be operating?
Right.
And then, like I said, there's a lot of criteria. Now they get into Is it rated for the available fault current or
Right.
short circuit current?
Okay.
So that's
the seventh one?
the seventh one I'm throwing in there.
What other updates have there been to NFPA 70E outside of that?
There's a lot of
Worth noting.
yeah.
There's Lori. Worth noting.
There's a lot of beneficial material in They have a handbook, a physical copy of the 70E handbook, and you can also get the online at NFPA link. But it also there's a lot more in-depth explanatory material for all those things. So it really goes into giving you scenarios and drawings and explanations for things, like basically kind of like OSHA standard interpretations.
Right.
But times 10.
Gotcha.
A lot more in depth on those things.
So if you're at a facility and this impacts you, you have this type of work, it behooves you to get the current version and probably go do a training session on the changes or updates. Make sure you assess your current company policies, procedures. Make sure you're not now falling out of compliance with this.
Right, yeah, and they should be already doing that anyways, because you've got to have the training every 3 years anyways.
Right.
Or the 70E training.
Well, you're supposed to.
Yes, supposed to.
Some people like to listen to this and go, "Oh yeah, we should do that."
We do that.
Yeah. We should probably do that.
Yeah, but if you're complying with that 3-year training requirement, you should be catching the new update every time it comes out. Now, again, whether or not you're doing a 4-hour class or 8-hour class or 3-day class on the topic, going to determine how much you understand it. So, like I said, that explanatory material is super beneficial for people, especially for people even experienced people, but especially people that are new to the standard, really helping them understand what those things are on kind of one location. So it's really handy.
Nice. Cool. All right, Drew, thanks once again for joining us here. Anybody that wants information about what Drew does, go to aerosafetyus.com.
That's right.
I always make sure I get that right. It's aerosafetyus.com.
That's right.
All right. And thanks for being such a great partner in safety with us at the Safety Pro Podcast. Anybody that's looking for safety services for your company, safety training, safety program development, audits, inspections, Aero Safety is your choice. It's my choice. And so we're recommending that you contact Aero Safety. Thanks again, Drew. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it. NFPA 70E updates, the ones you need to be aware of anyway, right? Thanks again, Drew. As a reminder, go to aerosafetyus.com. Check out everything Aero Safety has to offer. Also, to see the full video interview, hit the link in the show notes to head over to the Safety Pro Podcast community site. And I will talk to you on the next Safety Pro Podcast.